Welcome to the Explainer, where we break down big topics using the source material itself. Okay, let's dive right in. We're looking at this huge question, one that's really hanging over everything right now. Is American power on the edge? We're going to dig into the data and see what it tells us.
Yeah, this is a massive question, right? It's pretty much at the heart of every global debate. And for this explainer, we're going to approach it like a real geopolitical detective story.
So, what's our case filed? Well, our main piece of evidence comes from a research paper published in Frontiers in Political Science. And what it does is pretty cool. It looks back at the lessons from history to try and get a glimpse of what the future might hold for the U.S. All right, so let's get into it. What's the very first clue this historical data gives us? Well, it all comes down to the timeline. When the researchers looked back, they found this really consistent pattern. They analyzed 29 of history's greatest powers. We're talking everyone from the Roman Empire all the way to the British Empire, and guess what? They pretty much all followed the same arc. There's a rise to dominance, a peak, and then, well, an inevitable decline. And there's actually a name for this pattern. The researchers call it the hegemonic power curve. So naturally, the next step was to apply this exact model to the United States. They picked the Spanish-American War in 1898 as the starting line. And when they crunched the numbers, well, things got really interesting. Two very, very different projections popped out. Okay, so the first projection is, frankly, a little startling. If you look at the faster rise and fall pattern of other modern industrial powers, the model points to a potential turning point for American dominance as early as 2032. I mean, that's just around the corner. But hold on, there's another way to look at this. A second projection, this time based on the much longer lifespan of history's largest empires, pushes that turning point way further out, to 2067. So, look, the data doesn't give us one single magic date. But what it does suggest is that there's a pretty critical window opening up sometime in the next few decades. Okay, so if that's the when, the next logical question is how, right? How does this decline actually happen? Let's move on to our second clue, which is all about the common warning signs, the modus operandi, if you will, of a great power in decline. The analysis dug up 13 recurring markers of decline. You can see them all laid out here. They basically fall into three main buckets. You've got your internal problems like political division, external pressures, think military overreach, and then this more subtle fading of global influence, like when your alliances start to get shaky. And this, right here, brings us to the most crucial part of our investigation, the big question. Do any of these historical warning signs, these red flags, actually apply to the United States today? Let's do a little checkup, sticking to what the paper itself analyzed. First up, military overextension. The paper points out that the long, costly post-9/11 wars really left the U.S. military strained. Not only that, but it diverted focus and resources away from keeping an eye on economic and strategic rivals. It's a classic sign of an empire spreading itself just a little too thin.
Then there's the issue of what's happening at home. The paper highlights some pretty severe internal political divisions. And historically, this is a huge problem. It's really hard to project strength and lead the world when, a nation is busy fighting with itself.
And finally, let's talk about moral authority. The source makes a really important point here. A great power's legitimacy, its soft power, is an absolutely critical part of its overall strength. And the paper argues that major events, like the 2008 financial crisis and some really controversial foreign policy moves, have chipped away at that authority on the world stage. So, after looking at all this evidence, what's the final verdict? Well, while the data suggests the U.S. is at a really critical point, the paper doesn't just end there. It actually concludes by laying out three potential paths forward. Because, and this is important, history gives us patterns, but it isn't destiny. And this is where things get really fascinating. The paper emphasizes a key point, which you can see right here in this quote. We're in the middle of this massive civilizational level shift from an industrial world to an information-based one. And the argument is that this moment, right now, offers a unique opportunity for America to actually break the historical cycle. This isn't just another transition. It's a fundamental change in how the entire world operates. So what are the options? As the paper lays them out, there are three. First, there's renewal, transforming the old model to lead this new information age. Second, there's a path they call predation, basically using its remaining power in a more aggressive, transactional way. And third, there's partnership, choosing to share power and rebuild a new kind of global order. I mean, those are three very different futures. So, what's the bottom line here? The crucial takeaway is this. Yes, historical patterns are incredibly powerful, but they are not a death sentence. The choices that are made now, the path that America chooses, will have massive consequences for literally everyone, and it's going to define the global landscape for the next century. The historical precedents are clear. The evidence has been presented. So the only real question left is the one that's going to shape all of our futures.